They didn't even look up when I stood. That's the part I still go back to, not the dinner itself. Not the cake with my name misspelled. Not even the way my husband clinked his glass like a man who'd forgotten why we were all there. It was the silence that followed me when I pushed the chair back. The scrape of the legs against the floor. The pause that should have meant something, but didn't. Not one of them said my name. Not Ray, not our 3 grown children, not their spouses or their children. Nobody asked where I was going. Nobody reached for my hand. They just kept talking over plates I had chosen at a restaurant. I had booked beneath a banner that read 50 years of love. I walked out of that room with my coat in my hand and my heart, clenched tight against my ribs. The motor D opened the door for me. Said, "Need a taxi, ma'am?" "No," I said. "I'll walk." He nodded like he understood. Maybe he did. I think there are people in this world who see the quiet leaving. The kind that happens without a single slammed door. It was early evening, just past. Dusk. The light was soft. The sky held that uncertain color between lavender and gray. I could hear the hum of traffic down the street, the clink of silverware from other tables behind the windows. I didn't cry. Not yet. I walked down 2 blocks, then 3. Past the flower shop that had closed for the night. Past the little cafe where I used to meet Ray for tea before everything became a calendar entry. Didn't have a plan. I just knew I couldn't go home. Not after the way they'd looked through me like I was a coat rack or a painting they'd grown used to at that table. I had felt more ghost than guest. I had spent a week planning that dinner, chosen the photos for the slideshow, wrote a speech I never got to read, sat folded in my purse, beneath a packet of tissues and 2 peppermints. I'd wanted to say something simple about time. About how 50 years is not a number, it's 1,000 dinners, 100 arguments, a lifetime of small forgivenesses. I wanted to thank them. I wanted them to see me, but no one asked if I had something to say. They had talked about themselves, Dada, about her firm's new client. David, about his latest renovation. Ellie, about a show she might direct. Maybe, if funding came through. Ray had smiled, quiet. Not once did he look over and squeeze my hand. At one point, I cleared my throat. No one turned, so I left. Not in anger, not even in sorrow, really. It's just in the kind of certainty that arrives when a door clicks shut in your chest. Bye. The time I reached the corner store, my feet hurt. I stepped inside just to catch my breath, bought a bottle of water and a small package of almonds. The clerk didn't ask questions. Out front, I sat on a bench. Unwrapped the almonds, ate them one by one. It had been years since I'd done something. Just for myself with no explanation. That's when I made the decision. I wasn't going back, not to the table, not to the house, not to the role they'd written for a silent, smiling, always 2 steps behind the story. I didn't know where I would go yet. But I knew what I was leaving behind, and that was enough for now. A young couple passed by laughing. Her hand on his sleeve. I used to laugh like that, I thought, before everything turned into duty. Before I became someone who answered questions but was never asked. How she was, it's strange how long it takes to notice the water rising around. You get used to the wet. You think this is just what love looks like, damp, necessary, invisible. But tonight, I stepped out, and I was dry. I looked down at my hands. The veins more visible now, skin a little loose. A gold band still circling the same finger after 50 years. I had worn that ring through pregnancies, funerals, forgotten anniversaries, and late-night apologies whispered in the dark. But tonight, it felt heavy, not precious, just weight. I slid it off slowly, held it in my palm, then put it back on. Not out of sentiment. Just because I wasn't ready to decide what it meant now, across the street. The lights from a motel blinked like an afterthought. Vacancy. I stood, crossed slowly. The woman at the desk asked for my name. I gave it without flinching. She asked, "How many nights?" "Just 1," I said. But even then, I knew one night would become 2. Then maybe 3. long enough to find the outline of myself again, long enough to stop feeling like a placeholder in my own life. The room smelled like old soap and lemon polish. The walls were thin, but the bed was clean. I sat on the edge, took off my shoes, opened my purse, and unfolded the speech I never got to give. Read it to the quiet. I had written, 50 years is not a celebration of endurance. It's a testimony to presence, and I am here. I have been here all along. I folded it back up, set it on the nightstand, and turned out the light. Before there was silence, there was noise. Old kitchens, running water, screaming toddlers, someone, always slamming a drawer. I had a life that hummed. I moved through it like a reliable clock, winding lunches, folding sheets, returning calls. I was the one who remembered birthdays and packed Tylenol in every suitcase. My husband Ray worked long days, often longer nights. I stayed soft so he could stay hard. That was our unspoken deal. He wasn't cruel, just absent in a way that became background. We started with passion, doesn't everyone? But eventually, it dulled into polite touches and logistical briefings. When he retired, I thought we might find each other again. Oh, we didn't. He fell into golf and cable news. I fell into the shadows of our grown children. Dina was the oldest. She was always composed, even when she was little. She was 5. And scraped her knee. She pressed her lips together so tightly I thought they'd disappear. As a teenager, she wanted to be seen as brilliant, not beautiful. She was both, though she never let me say it. She became a lawyer, married a dentist, who made everything about flossing. They gave me my first grandchild. I remember bringing lasagna to their apartment the week after she gave birth, and how she thanked me with a text message even though I was sitting on her couch. That moment stuck. David was the middle one. A surprise baby. He was the one who snuck into bed when there was thunder, who hugged with both arms, who told me I was the best person he knew. He married late. His wife never liked me. I always smiled through it. One time when I offered to watch their son so they could have a date night, she said, maybe when he's older. He was 3. I nodded and folded my hands. Ellie was the youngest, artistic, dramatic, full of flash. She was my echo, or at least I thought so. She used to ask to brush my hair while I read her stories. Then she turned 16 and stopped coming home for dinner. Said I hovered. Said I didn't understand. She went to Chicago and never came back. I watched her life on Instagram more than I heard her voice. I think it all shifted after my mother died. She had lived with us the last 5 years of her life. A small, dignified woman who smelled like lavender and had arthritis in her thumbs. When she passed, no one really called. Dina sent flowers. David said, sorry about Nana. Ellie never said a thing. The next week, Ray asked what was for dinner. I stared at him so long, he finally got up and made eggs. Still, I tried. That's what mothers do. We try again and again, even after they stop seeing us. I made birthday cakes with white icing and fresh strawberries because that was David's favorite. I ironed Dina's pantsuits when she left them here during a visit. I kept the upstairs guest room just the way Ellie liked it, with the same quilt, the same stupid scented candle she said smelled like hope. Every gesture was a question. Do I still matter to you? And every answer was a quiet no. There were small things, missed calls, postponed visits, texts that read sorry, too busy. It didn't happen in a single moment. That would have been easier, maybe. Instead, it was like being erased slowly, like a pencil line rubbed away bit by bit until only a faint impression was left behind. I remember one Thanksgiving. The food was on the table, the kind that takes a week to plan and 2 days to cook. I called everyone to sit. They were still on their phones. I stood behind my chair and waited. When they finally sat down, no one made eye contact. Dina was discussing her firm's new intern. David was talking about property taxes. Ellie was FaceTiming someone during the salad. Ray poured the wine, like it was his only job. No one said, Mom, this is beautiful. No one said, thank you. That night, I washed every dish by hand. My back ached. The house was quiet except for the hum of the dishwasher and my own breath. I looked at my hands wrinkled, tired, and thought, is this what devotion earns you? A kitchen full of crumbs and people who don't remember how you got them here. But I wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. Ray and I started planning the 50th anniversary dinner a year in advance. He didn't care much about the details, but he said it would be nice to have everyone together. I booked the restaurant. I chose the flowers. I found the photos from our wedding day. It's the one where I wore my mother's pearl earrings and Ray looked like he might pass out from love or heat. I put together a slideshow. I picked the music. I told myself this would be the night they saw me again. I ordered a new dress, navy blue, long sleeves. It reminded me of the one I wore on our 25th. The woman who sold it to me said I looked elegant. I held her gaze longer than necessary. I think she felt it how badly I needed to be seen. I even wrote a speech. Nothing dramatic. Just a few words about love and time and how family is the reason we keep waking up when it would be easier to go back to sleep. I folded it neatly into my clutch, just in case the moment came. It didn't. That night at the restaurant, they all showed up late. Dina took a call in the hallway. David was distracted, kept checking his watch. Ellie sat farthest from me and ordered oysters, which she knows I can't stand the smell of. Ray raised a toast that lasted 15 seconds. To love and to time, he said, and lifted his glass. I clinked mine. Barely no one asked me to speak. No one mentioned the slideshow. The waiter brought out the cake, chocolate with raspberry. I don't like raspberry. That used to be a joke between us. Nobody remembered. I sat there, my hands folded in my lap. I looked at each of them, one by one, and thought, so this is it. This is how it ends. Not with shouting or doors slammed. Just with indifference, polished and plated. I excused myself halfway through dessert. They didn't notice. Or maybe they did. Maybe they chose not to stop me. The valet asked if I needed help. I shook my head. I drove home without the radio on. When I got there, I left the porch light off. And I didn't cry. Not then. Not yet. That would come later in a room with beige walls and a quiet humming fridge. Far from the table where I was supposed to belong. But that night, for the first time, I knew something had changed in me. Something small, maybe, but permanent. I didn't tell anyone I'd left. Not Ray, not the children. I assumed they'd notice eventually. Maybe when the bill came. Maybe when the car wasn't in the garage. Maybe not at all. The next morning, I woke early. I always do. Years of habit, even silence, has a rhythm. I made coffee 1 cup instead of 2. Sat at the kitchen table, the one with the nick in the wood where David once dropped a fork. The house was still full of memories, but the warmth had long leaked out of them. Like candles that were never relit. Ray hadn't come home the night before he'd gone back with Dina and her husband. That was planned. I'd forgotten. Or maybe I'd pushed it away. The silence in the house was honest. It didn't pretend to care. I went upstairs and pulled the dress from where I'd hung it on the closet door. I folded it carefully and put it in a box. I didn't want to see it again. I didn't want it to see me. Then I sat down at my desk. There were documents, things I hadn't looked at in years. The deed to the house, our will, the passwords. I kept them written down, though the children had insisted I move to a digital folder. I smiled at that. How they wanted to organize my life from a distance, from convenience. I opened a manila envelope and pulled out the healthcare proxy. My name was still first, Ray's name second. The third line alternate agent had been left blank. We never added the kids. We said we would. One of those things you mean to do? I stared at that line. Then I put the envelope away. The betrayal didn't come in a headline. It came in email forwards and missing thank yous. In birthday cards with just signatures. In holidays where I did the planning but was asked to stay out of the photos. And then there was the checking account. I'd opened it with Ray in 1973. The year after we were married. Back when every dollar was measured, over time it grew. Small deposits, grocery change, later, inheritance from my mother. I always managed the books. Ray let me, said I had the head for it. We had a joint account and a savings account. But there was another one, just mine. Started when I began teaching adult literacy at the community center. It wasn't much, but I put away what I could. Last month, I checked it. Routine, I logged in. The balance was lower than I expected. Not empty, but not what it should have been. I asked Ray casually over breakfast. He said maybe the car insurance had come out. I knew it hadn't. A week later, I looked again. A transfer. To a new account? Number I didn't recognize. I searched the number. It was registered to our family trust. The one Dina had helped set up. She had power of attorney. Ray had given it to her last year, after his surgery. Said it was just precautionary. Hadn't questioned it. That was my mistake. I didn't confront anyone. I called the bank instead. Asked for statements. The young man on the line sounded confused. Said the account had been linked to the trust 6 months ago. Said there had been 3 transfers. I thanked him. Then I sat for a long time. My fingers curled around the edge of the table. I could hear the clock ticking in the other room. I thought about the time Dina told me not to worry about the medical bills from Ray's recovery. That she and David would take care of it. I'd believed her. I thought it was kindness. Maybe. It was. Maybe a WASN, single quotes. I thought about the time Ellie asked if I wanted to sign something to streamline future inheritance taxes. She said it was just a formality. Said I didn't need to read it all. I didn't sign. I told her I wanted to think. I think now that's saved me. I pulled out my folder of paper copies, birth certificates, marriage license, a photocopy of the old will. I made a list in my notebook. I drew a box around every item that still had my name on it. And then I made another list. What needed to change by noon? I had called a lawyer. Not Dina, not anyone she'd know. A new one. Found through a woman I met in line at the DMV 6 months ago. We'd started talking about the best kind of travel thermos. She had a calm face and a strong handshake. I remembered her name. Wrote it down back then because something about her felt solid. She became the first person I trusted with the truth. When I told her what I'd found, she nodded slowly, not surprised. She said it happens more than anyone wants to believe. You were the bank, she said. Now you're becoming the locksmith. She helped me transfer the remaining funds. Quietly, no notice sent. She helped me remove Dina's power of attorney and draw up new papers. We wrote a new will, not out of spite. Out of clarity. It felt like standing up after years of sitting. I found a small apartment listed in a nearby town. It had a porch and a view of the river, month-to-month lease. The landlord was an older woman named June who offered to show me the washer-dryer right away. She didn't ask questions. I paid the first 2 months in cash. I packed slowly. Not everything, just what mattered. The quilt my mother made. The wooden spoon with the burn mark. The notebook with my handwriting from 1982 where I used to write down what the kids had said back when their words made me smile. I left the rest. I didn't leave a note. Not yet. Ray called that evening. Asked if I'd gone to visit Ellie. I said no. He asked when I was coming home. I said I didn't know. He didn't argue, just paused, then said, okay, and that pause told me everything. He knew in some part of him. Maybe he always had. Maybe he'd looked away too often. Or maybe he'd decided that if he didn't ask, I'd never answer. But I had answered, not with anger, with action. That night, in the motel room I'd rented for a few days before the apartment opened, I lay down fully clothed. The hum of the fridge was steady, the blanket scratchy. But I slept for 8 uninterrupted hours. It's first time in years. Not because I wasn't sad, but because I was no longer waiting for someone to see me. The first thing I bought for the new apartment was a kettle, nothing fancy. It's just a small silver one with a black handle and a chipped spout. Found it at a second-hand shop 2 blocks from the river. The woman who ran the place said it whistled. A little off-key. I liked that. Made it feel real. I spent the first week in that apartment waking up before dawn and just sitting, listening. It was quiet in a different way than the house had been. There, silence meant absence. Here, it meant peace. I hadn't told them where I was. I'd forwarded my mail to a P.O. box. I'd kept the same phone number for now. I wasn't hiding. I just wasn't reachable. Not in the way they were used. 2, there was something sacred in the space. The walls still smelled faintly of old wood and lavender cleaner. The windows stuck a little when I opened them. I liked the effort it took. I liked feeling something fight back, even a window frame. I wrote lists. I wrote questions. I filled pages of a new notebook with answers I wasn't sure about. What do I want to eat? Who am I when no one's watching? What do I keep? Okay. I kept the chipped mug with the sunflowers. Kept the scarf Ellie gave me when she was 12. I kept my name. I did not keep their expectations. The lawyer sent me the final copies of the changes. Everything was now in my hands. Bank account, power of attorney, healthcare directive, a new will. It was a quiet stack of pages, stapled and bound. Sitting on my tiny table next to a cup of mint tea, I signed them without hesitation. There's something different about choosing your life rather than reacting to it. I hadn't realized how long I'd been in response mode. Decades of adjusting to moods, waiting to be asked. Folding myself small so others could feel big. They say women shrink with age. That's not just the body, it's the voice. It's the presence. It's the habit of disappearing in plain sight. Not anymore. I bought a lockbox and put the new papers inside. Tucked it under my bed. The key hung from a red ribbon on a nail beside the door. Not hidden, not afraid. A few days later, I went to the bank in person. Closed the old joint account. The young man behind the desk asked if I wanted to notify the Kona. I said no, thank you. He hesitated, then nodded. That pause again, that flicker of understanding. I wonder how many women like me he's signed shoulders squared, jaw tight, making choices that should have come decades earlier. I took the cashier's check and walked 2 miles home. Didn't even call a cab. The air was cool. My feet ached. I felt alive. Ray didn't call that week. I half expected him to, but then again, maybe not. We'd lived so many years in a house full of unsaid things. He was always good at pretending. Everything was fine as long as nothing collapsed outright. This time, something had collapsed. And I didn't pick it up. Dina was the first to message. Hope everything's okay. Let me know if you need anything. That was it. No call, no real question, just a performative poke. She didn't even use my name. I didn't respond. 2 days later, David called. His voice on the voicemail was careful. Not warm, not cold. Just calculated. Hey, Mom, just checking in. We've been trying to reach you. Call when you can. I played it once. Then again, I could hear the pressure in his tone. It's the edge of confusion. Not concern, confusion, because I had slipped out of the role. They cast me in. They didn't know how to find me when I wasn't where they left me. The final call came from Ellie late at night. I didn't answer, but I listened. She sounded more like herself than the others. Or maybe just more afraid, Mom. I don't know what's going on. Can you just let us know you're okay, please? I sat with that one, played it again and again until her voice became just sound. I was okay. 4. The first time in years I didn't owe them my location. I didn't owe them explanations. I had spent decades filling their cups, even when mine had run dry. I had smiled through dismissals, forgiven silences, accepted the slow siphoning of my worth in the name of keeping peace. I had been kind. I had been generous. I had been invisible. Now I was just a woman in a room of her own, drinking tea that tasted like freedom. One morning, I walked to the river. There was a bench there, half hidden under a tree that had started to bloom early. I sat, watched the water, watched the way the light hit the ripples and made them dance. I stayed there for hours. A young girl passed with her dog. She smiled at me. "Nice day, huh?" "It is," I said, and I meant it. I thought about how small choices change lives, not in dramatic ways, not like in books, but in real quiet ways. You sign one form, you pack one bag. You answer no call, and you begin again. The kettle let out its off-key whistle. When I got home, I poured the water, sat down, wrote in my notebook, "Today I didn't apologize for being gone. Today no one interrupted my thoughts. Today I was not missed, but I was not erased. That is enough." The wind picked up outside. It rattled the old screen door. I let it because it wasn't trying to enter. It was just passing through. I left the porch light off. That was how I knew this wasn't temporary. In the old house, I used to flick it on automatically, even when I was the last one in. It was instinct, like setting a place at the table no matter who was home. A kind of faith. I used to believe someone might come back late and need that light to guide them, but here, in this apartment above a bakery that smells like cinnamon by 4 a.m., I don't need to leave anything on for anyone else. If someone wants to find me, they'll have to walk in daylight. The days took on rhythm, not routines, something softer than that. I woke when I wanted to. I made toast and scrambled eggs just for me. I bought honey I liked instead of the brand Ray preferred. I walked the block to the little market and let myself wander. I bought a small pot of basil and named it Grace. I started a notebook titled What I Like. And it surprised me how much I had to guess at. Nobody knew where I was. That became a kind of power. Not petty, not cruel, just clean. Like a breath. Held for too long, finally let go. The lawyer sent me a final packet. The new will notarized. She'd added a small note on top, handwritten. "You've done something brave. Most don't." I didn't feel brave. I felt awake. I didn't tell Ray. He'd called once. I didn't answer. I stared at the screen until the ringing stopped. A week? Later, he emailed, "Just checking in. Let us know when you're ready to talk." That word, us. There was no us anymore. That was the part he hadn't noticed. Or maybe noticed too late. After the email, I deleted our shared calendar. The one where I used to put doctor's appointments and birthdays and reminders, like Ellie's art show or Dina's flight. It took 5 clicks. Years of invisible work, gone in 5 clicks. I printed a photo of myself, one taken by a stranger in the park. I hadn't even known they'd snapped it. I was sitting on a bench with my head tilted toward the sky, sunlight resting on my cheek. I looked peaceful. Whole, I pinned it to the fridge with a magnet that said begin. Again, in the old house, the fridge had been covered in everyone else's lives. Report cards, ultrasound photos, save the dates. Not one picture of me. Not one drawing made for me that I hadn't tucked away in a drawer to keep from being thrown out. Here, it was just my face, my piece, and that one quiet phrase. I made copies of the new documents. One set for the lockbox. One set mailed to the lawyer. And one set I folded into a brown envelope and sent to the house. No note, no return address. Just the papers. Let them read it like a riddle. Let them realize the ink was final. I imagined Dina opening it, her eyes narrowing. The control, slipping just slightly from her grip. I imagined David saying, "She didn't mean it. She'll come around." I imagined Ellie crying but not calling. I didn't feel satisfaction, only stillness. That's what they never understood. My revenge was never loud. It wasn't rage or ruined holidays. It wasn't a Facebook post or a letter sent at midnight. My revenge was silence, absence, paperwork. I didn't need to scream. I just needed to disappear in a way they couldn't undo. The woman who owned the bakery. Downstairs, her name was Maura, asked me one morning if I'd like to come down early and help with the first batch. I told her I'd never baked professionally. She shrugged. "We're not professionals. It's just women who wake up hungry and make something warm for the world. I liked her. Didn't ask questions. Steve handed me an apron and showed me how to braid dough for the challah. I messed up the first. Two, she said. It's still bread. We worked in comfortable silence. At one point, she looked over and said, "You have very quiet hands." I said, "Spent 50 years folding other people's clothes." She smiled. That explains it. I left that morning with a small bag of pastries and flour on my shirt. I sat on my porch and ate something I hadn't made myself. Something someone else had handed to me with no expectation attached. I didn't look at my phone. I didn't wait for them to ask where. I didn't care. I thought of all the times I'd been dismissed. In rooms I cleaned, the jokes made around me as if I were invisible. The way Ellie once laughed and said, "Mom, you wouldn't understand. It's different now." As if I were a relic. As if I hadn't built their lives out of my own. They were right, in a way. I wouldn't understand. I wouldn't understand how you forget the person who made your favorite meal every year without fail. I wouldn't understand how you take money from someone who gave you your first allowance and say it was for security. I wouldn't understand how you can hug someone at a party and not feel the weight of what they've carried for you. They had their reasons, I'm sure of it, and I had mine. My reason was this. I was done being a memory while I was still alive. I was done being a name on a calendar, a slot in a rotation, a guest in my own story. So I signed the papers. I sealed the box. I packed my toothbrush and 2 sweaters and the book I never finished because I kept falling asleep from worry. I left the porch light off, and when I came home that day, after baking with Mara, after walking past a dog who looked up at me like I mattered, after eating bread warm enough to remind me what care tastes like, I saw my photo on the fridge, and I said out loud, "To no one at all, there you are." They started to unravel about 3 weeks after the envelope arrived. It started small, a missed call from Dina, then another. Then a string of voicemails that all sounded increasingly tight around the edges. She used my name more than she ever used to. Mom, we need to talk. Mom, this is important. Mom, please. I listened. I didn't reply. She started texting in bursts, like urgency might substitute for care. Did you move out? Where are you staying? Is Dad with you? I'm worried. This isn't like you, but it was exactly like me. But me she never saw. The me who planned every birthday party down to the color of the napkins. The me who sat in silent rooms full of raised voices and lowered glances. The me who cried into dishwater and still came back with clean plates. David wrote an email, said he didn't understand what I was trying to prove, said the family was concerned, said I was making things more difficult than they had to be. I almost laughed. Difficult. As if living in a house where your absence is more noticed than your presence wasn't difficult. As if being erased over decades and asked to smile about it wasn't the hardest part of all. They weren't concerned. They were exposed. I had broken the script. I wasn't where they'd left me. I wasn't reacting the way they'd prepared for. I hadn't shouted. I hadn't begged. I hadn't even explained. I'd just gone. And now the structure they'd built, one where I was predictable and pliable, was crumbling. Even Ray called again, left a message. I know you're upset. I know things haven't been perfect. But let's not throw everything away. We can talk. Please come home. There it was. Come home. The phrase rang in my ears for hours. Come home to what? A chair no one saves for me. A bedroom that became a storage space. A family who only touches base when there's something to transfer, assign, or extract. Home had stopped being mine long ago. I had only just now caught up to the truth of it. Still, I won't lie, hearing his voice made my stomach pull. Not love, just memory. 5 decades is hard to erase, even when you've been erased within them. But I had made a decision, not with rage, with a signature. With silence. They didn't know about the new documents yet. Not really. Not the full scope Dina had guessed. She knew enough about paperwork to recognize what the envelope meant. But I imagine she still believed she could undo it. David probably thought I just needed time. Ellie. Her silence said more than her words ever did. But then something changed. The panic moved from private to public. I saw it on Facebook. A photo posted by Dina's husband. A family dinner. Everyone smiling. The caption read, "Family means everything. Especially now." I wasn't in the photo, of course not. But I saw the comments, "Thinking of you all. Hope everything's okay. Sending love." And then, buried deeper in the thread, a message from a woman I barely remembered, a neighbor from years back. She wrote, "Tell your mom we're praying for her. She always had the kindest smile." And just like that, I knew. They had turned me into a crisis, a plot line, situation to manage. Not a woman making choices, not a mother with a voice, just a shadow with a diagnosis they invented. I almost felt sorry for them. Almost that weekend, I passed by the window of a little bookstore and saw a sign that said author reading, Women Who Vanish by Choice. I went in. I sat in the back. The author was maybe a decade younger than me, sharp and steady. She read a passage that struck like a match inside my ribs. Sometimes leaving is not escape. Sometimes it's arrival. Afterward, I bought the book and had her sign it, she asked. "Want me to personalize?" "No," I said. "I just want the name." She smiled. "Then you already know who you are." On the walk home, my phone rang. It was Ellie. I let it go to voicemail again. Her message was different this time, Mom. "I don't know what's happening. I think about you every day. I know I haven't said things right. I know I messed up. If you're safe, that's enough. But I hope one day you'll tell me where you are." She paused. "Even if it's just to tell me not to come." There was silence at the end. No click, just breath. I sat on my porch that night, legs curled under me. I played the message again. She sounded like a child, and part of me, the part that used to tie her shoes and braid her hair to reach out, to comfort. But then I remembered the dinner, how she hadn't looked at me once. How she had laughed across the table like I wasn't there. How she had taken and never asked how I was holding up under the weight of it, so I didn't call back. Not yet. I did, however, take out my notebook. I wrote a letter, just for myself, not to send. "Dear Ellie, I hear you. I love you. But I cannot make myself small again so you can feel big. I will not disappear so you don't have to face who you've become. This silence isn't punishment. It's my sanctuary." I folded the page, slipped it into the book I'd bought, and tucked it on the shelf if she ever finds me. Maybe I'll hand it to her, maybe, but for now, I stay still, not in hiding, in peace. I stopped waiting. That's how I knew I'd begun living again. The mornings no longer started with the pull to check messages to see who had tried to reach me or explain themselves. I didn't check the mail hoping for a letter with the words I'd longed to hear. I no longer scrolled through their photos, online looking for evidence of guilt or of grief, or of the hole I might have left. Instead, I folded towels still warm from the dryer and let myself enjoy the scent. I walked to the river and watched the water without needing it to mean anything. I sat in a cafe near the laundromat and ordered things I didn't used to. An almond croissant, a cappuccino with cinnamon. The barista began to recognize me. She always said "same thing today," and smiled like I was someone worth noticing. Her name was Lacey. She was young, maybe mid-20s, and kind in the way people are when they've known loneliness. She never pried. But one morning, she said softly, "You look less sad than you did when you first came in." I didn't flinch. I just nodded. Said, "That's because I am." And I was. Not happy, not yet. But not hollow. There's a difference. Mara, from the bakery, started giving me more to do. Just little things. Dusting shelves, counting change, tying the wax paper over cinnamon rolls with a piece of twine that never seemed to cooperate. I wasn't paid. Didn't ask to be. Felt good to be needed for something simple. Something honest. One afternoon, Mara handed me a brown paper bag and said, "Take this to the house, 2 streets over, blue shutters, wild roses on the fence." Old Mr. Avery can't get out much these days. He always orders the cherry loaf. I carried it over in the warmth of early spring. Knocked gently. A thin man with careful eyes opened the door. He looked at me like he was trying to place a memory. "You must be the new one," he said. "Mara told me someone kind had shown up." I didn't know how to answer that, so I just handed him the bag and said, "The cherry loaf's still warm." He smiled and nodded. Told me his daughter used to make the same kind, years ago, before she moved to Florida and forgot how to call. Then he cleared his throat and thanked me. And we stood there for a moment to people who had both been left behind in different ways. When I walked back, I felt something lift in my chest. Not joy, just recognition that I was no longer alone in the world. Even if my family thought I'd vanished, I started keeping a small notebook in my bag, one I'd bought on impulse. The cover had a gold design, ferns and stars, and something like a moon. I called it my evidence book. Not of what I'd escaped, but of what I was building. I wrote down the things that made me feel real. Apricot jam on sourdough toast. A child's laughter from the apartment below. A man whistling off-key near the river. Lacey's chipped nail polish in shades of orange and blue. The way my hands looked holding a cup of tea, still capable, still mine. I wrote them all down. Because they were mine, these small miracles. Not borrowed, not repaid, not diminished. It didn't come with guilt or price tags. It just came. That same week, I found a folded paper in the mailbox. No envelope. It's just a page torn from a legal pad. The handwriting was David's. "I'm sorry. I know I've failed you. I don't know how to fix it. But I want to. I do." I read it twice, then folded it in half and placed it under my kettle. I didn't throw it away. But I didn't answer either sorry. From him had always come after consequence. Not as recognition. Not as love. And love, when it's real, doesn't wait until the lights go out to say it. A few nights later, Mara invited me to her sister's birthday dinner. Nothing big, just 8 people, a rented back room at the pub on the corner, and a table covered in mismatched plates and paper crowns. They welcomed me like I'd always been part of them. Passed dishes to me first, asked where I was from, but not the kind of from that tries to trace your shame. It's just the kind that wants to understand your shape. One of them, a man named Roger, leaned toward me at one point and said, "You have the kind of face that looks like it knows a lot." I smiled. Said, "I've lived long enough to know what to let go of." He nodded. Raised his glass. "To letting go," he said. Everyone CLINKED. And in that tiny room, surrounded by people who didn't share my blood but offered me warmth anyway, I felt something. Strange. Safety. Not the kind I'd fought for in a house where my name was forgotten in introductions. Not the kind I'd hoped for when I baked cakes and packed lunches and filled stockings alone. This was the safety of being seen, without history or obligation. Being called by your first name and meaning it. After dinner, I walked home slowly. The streetlights flickered in a rhythm that made me feel like the world had a heartbeat. I reached my door, unlocked it, closed it behind me. No porch light. The kettle whistled a Ganofsky, stubborn. I poured a cup of tea, sat down with the evidence book. I wrote, "Tonight." I laughed. Not because someone needed me to, it's just because I could. And that was enough. The letter arrived in a plain envelope with my name written in a hand I hadn't seen in years. No return address. Just my name, small and careful, like it was afraid to be rejected. I knew it was from Ellie before I even opened it. There was always something tentative in the way she wrote. Like her words were trying not to say too much, but couldn't help themselves. I sat at the kitchen table, the envelope in my hand, the kettle humming in the background. I didn't open it right away. I just let it rest on the table. Let myself feel the weight of it before I let it speak. It was 3 pages long. Folded once. No scribbles. No crossouts. Clean, practiced. She started by saying she was sorry. Not in the vague way people apologize when they're caught or uncomfortable, but in the quiet way that means they've been sitting with something sharp for it. Long time. She said she'd thought about me every day since the anniversary dinner. She said she noticed I left. She didn't know what to do. She said she hadn't known how to ask if I was hurting. 'Cause somewhere along the way, she had learned that I didn't want to be asked. That line stayed with me because I knew what she meant. I had spent years making it easy for them not to. Worry, smiling through disappointment, laughing off dismissal, saying, "It's fine, don't worry, I'm just tired." I taught them I didn't need care. And they believed me. That was my mistake. But believing it forever, that was theirs, Ellie wrote. About things I had forgotten. The time I stayed up all night to make her history project look like a real scroll, burning the edges with a lighter, wrapping it in twine. The way I used to leave notes in her lunch bag with tiny drawings, the smell of my hand cream, the softness of my voice when she cried over a boy who never called back. She said, "I didn't forget you, Mom. I just stopped showing it." And I don't know why. I read that sentence 3 times. She ended by saying she didn't expect a response. She hoped I was safe, that she loved me, that she always had. I folded the letter and placed it beside my tea. I sat there for a long time, not speaking, not crying, breathing. It would have been easier if she had stayed silent. They all had. It would have confirmed the story I'd written to survive. That they didn't care that I didn't matter. That I was right to leave and never look back. But Ellie's letter, it cracked something open, not the past. That was still jagged and unresolved, but the present, that small hope. I had buried under resignation and paperwork hit, stirred. I didn't. Right back. Not that night. Instead, I pulled out the notebook again and opened to the page I'd written months ago. Dear Ellie, the letter I never sent. I read it again, line by line. Then I turned the page and started a new one. Dear Ellie, I got your letter. I read it. Slowly, I read it again and again. I believe you. Not everything is healed. Not everything can be. But I believe you meant what you wrote. Okay? And that matters to me. You don't owe me repair. Just honesty. Just presence. I'm not ready to come back, but I'm not hiding. I'm building something. Maybe, someday, you'll see it. I didn't sign it. I didn't send it. I folded it and tucked it into a small envelope. Wrote her name on the outside. I placed it on the mantel. That was enough. That weekend, I went to Mara's again. She was short-staffed, and I offered to help with the counter. I wore an apron and greeted customers like I'd always belonged. There, one woman came in with a little girl who looked about 5. She clung to her mother's coat and whispered. Something about not wanting to speak to strangers. I crouched beside her and said, I get that. I used to feel the same. But sometimes, strangers give you cookies. She laughed. It's a real one. Her mother smiled, mouthed thank you, and ordered a croissant. When they left, Mara nudged me. You've got a way with people. I don't think it's that, I said. I think it's just, when you've been invisible, you notice who else is fading. She didn't say anything. She just placed a fresh loaf of bread in my hands and said, take this one home. It's the good kind. That night, I sat on the porch with a slice of bread, still warm, slathered in butter and raspberry jam. I thought of how I used to eat standing up, cleaning as I went, always worried about crumbs, noise, time. Now I sat still. Let the crumbs fall where they may. Let the world turn without needing to be in charge of it. Ellie had reached out, not to fix me, not to earn anything, just to say. She still remembered my hands and my voice. And the woman who once made her feel safe, and for now, that was enough not to go back. But to begin again, maybe one day I'd send the letter. Maybe one day I'd call. But not yet first. I needed to finish the life I had finally started building for myself, one where peace didn't depend on being needed, only on being whole. There is a small beach just outside town where the river slows and widens. The rocks are smooth and warm by late morning. It's not marked by signs or paths, just a dip in the road, a fence bent in one corner. Mara told me about it once, said it's where she goes when her hands feel too full. I went there yesterday, walked the whole way, brought a thermos of tea to Plums and my old canvas bag. The wind had that early summer softness to it, warm, but with something underneath like the last whisper of spring hadn't quite let go. I hadn't been to the water in years. Real water, I mean. Not the riverbank by the bakery or the rain pooling in gutters. This was different. Open, alive. The kind of place that doesn't need anyone's permission to exist. I sat on a flat stone and watched the sunlight move. You notice different things when no one's talking to you. A bird's call echoing twice. The way a wave pulls back before it rises. The sand shifting under your heel, but only slightly, like it's thinking about leaving. I brought 3 things. With me in the bag, the letter Ellie sent, the photo of myself on the fridge, it's great, and a small seashell I'd kept since I was a girl. That shell was nothing special. Not really. White, ridged, chipped on one edge. I'd picked it up on a trip with my parents when I was 8. We'd gone to the coast, and I remember my mother holding my hand as we walked along the shore. She told me to choose one thing, just one, that I could carry with me to remember that I was here, that I mattered. I chose the shell, and for years. I kept it in drawers, in boxes, tucked behind things I deemed more important. But it followed me, through apartments, into marriage, into motherhood. Quietly, it remained, until I found it again a few months ago. At the bottom of an old jewelry case I hadn't opened in years. I almost threw it away, but something in me stopped. Something that still remembered the little girl who believed she could claim the ocean. In a single broken piece, so I brought it here. I held it in my hand as I read Ellie's letter one more time. The words hadn't changed, but I had. It's a part of me that once needed her apology to be perfect, now only needed it to be true. It was. I unfolded the photo next, the one taken by a stranger in the park. Me, looking skyward. A moment of quiet, captured without my permission. And yet it was the most honest picture anyone had ever taken of me. No performance. No audience. Just breath. Just light. I looked at it a long time. Then I let the breeze take it. It didn't fly far. It just skimmed the ground, then landed gently on a patch of sun-warmed rock. I didn't chase it. It had done its job. I reached into the bag one more time and pulled out a pen and paper. Not the notebook. Just a page. One clean sheet. And I wrote myself a final letter. Dear Anna, you kept waiting to be chosen. But you were always enough. They forgot your voice, but you did not lose it. You gave and gave. And then you finally gave to yourself. This is not a disappearance. This is a return. You were never too much. You were simply surrounded by those who wanted less. Let that go now. Let it all go. You are here. You matter. I folded the letter and pressed it to the inside of the shell. Then set both gently on the stone beside me. The tide would come eventually. Maybe the water would carry them away. Maybe not. Either way, I had released them. And in doing so, I released myself. I stood up slowly. My knees ached in the way they always did now, but I didn't curse the pain. I'd earned every tender joint, every line on my face, every strand of white in my hair. I brushed off my hands, picked up the empty bag, took one last look at the little shell holding the letter, and then turned back toward the road. No one was waiting at home. And yet I wasn't alone, because I had found the one person who had been missing all along, me. I passed a family on the walk back. A young girl was running ahead, arms outstretched like wings. Her mother called after her, laughing. I smiled. I didn't envy them. I didn't ache. I just remembered what it was to run without looking back. Okay? Now, I knew what it was to walk forward, even after everything had come apart. Back at the apartment, I made tea and left the front door open to the breeze. Mara had left a loaf of lemon bread on my doormat. A note in her scribbled handwriting said, "Save some for me." Tomorrow, 9 a.m., I took one slice, wrapped the rest, sat at my table, and closed my eyes for a moment. This wasn't the life I planned. It wasn't the life they thought I'd accept. It was better, not bigger, not louder, just mine. And when the kettle sang again, off key as ever, I whispered, "B'Kime here. I always was."